gold, representing the Babylonian Empire. He then saw the breast of what? Silver. And who is it that overthrew the Babylonians? Cyrus of Persia. Then he saw the belly and the thighs of brass, representing what empire? Who overthrew the Persians? The only general who never lost a war. Never lost a war. Alexander the Great. Now, Alexander fought Darius, king of the Medes, on the plains of Issus. Darius had 600,000 men. Alexander had 60,000. And Alexander whipped him. That's how good. Alexander is the greatest general of all time. No general can compare to Alexander the Great. None of the Roman generals. And then, as Daniel was witnessing this vision, with the Grecian Empire ruling the world, who overtook them? The legs and the feet of iron. Who was the Iron Empire? Rome. The feet were part iron and part clay. What did that signify? Do iron and clay mix? No. So Daniel saw the demise of the Roman Empire. But during the Roman Empire, Christianity was born. So why did God want the Roman Empire to rule the world when Christianity was born? When the Son of God came into the world? There is a reason, and that's what we're going to study. Reasons the Roman Empire was conducive or beneficial for Christianity. God. Roads went everywhere. When Herod the Great was given Caesarea on the sea. Caesarea Philippi was north of the Sea of Galilee, and Philip was the ruler at that time, and he named it after himself, Philippi. He named it after the Roman emperor, Caesarea. But Alexander was given Caesarea on the sea. That's the Caesarea just 70 miles northwest of Jerusalem. He built piers 100 feet deep in the Mediterranean, pouring cement. And those piers are still there to this day. So the Roman Empire had the most ingenious builders of all time. There's a reason for God doing everything the way He does. There's a reason for the sky being blue. We won't get into that. There's a reason He chose Palestine as His starting point for His people. We see it as a God-forsaken area. God saw it as a plush meadow. All right? What's the predominant color in the world? Just look outside. Wherever you go, you see what? Green. Why do you think God made the grass and the meadows and the trees and the plants green? Was it just He liked green? No, there's always a reason behind it. Green is the most soothing of all colors. Those who are around green all the time, your farmers and your ranchers, those in the nursery business, live longer than any other category of people. It is the most tranquil of all colors. It settles the mind down. And insurance statistics will prove this. All right, so let's get to our lesson. So why was Rome to rule the world when Jesus came into existence and thus brought the gospel. Number one, peace. The world had not ever been at peace since Alexander the Great. Now, nobody challenged Alexander except a fool like Darius. When he was coming to Jerusalem, he was coming from the north on down to Jerusalem, Jaddua the high priest ran out to meet him. What was he doing? He was kissing up to Alexander the Great. And it paid off because Alexander didn't kill him. All right, so nobody in their right mind would challenge Alexander the Great. He was that fearful and that powerful. Therefore, there was peace in the world. But after Alexander the Great, there started being civil wars popping up everywhere. Rome is divided into three major. The regal period, the republic, and the empire. The regal period was that part of the Roman government made up of 7 different kings, and they ruled for a total of 242 years. After them came the republic. Now, the republic was when 2 consuls ruled together. The king was single. The republic was 2 consuls co-ruling. And that was for 240 years, almost the same time. My bathroom? He's going to resurrect this. He was on mute. Johnson, you come up here. This is one time you're innocent. There's a guy I worked with one time, working my way through college. He was on the old turnpike going to we're coming back from Fort Worth to Arlington, our base plant. He called headquarters and said, "I'm out of gas." So the guy goes out there with gas, and he got in the cab of the truck and flipped it on reserve, took off. He never put the gas. The truck had plenty of gas. The guy just didn't know to hit the reserve switch. That's what happened to me. All right. During the co-consulship, and they did have a Senate. The Roman Senate was 300 members. But the senators, the Senate was subject to the 2 consuls. They simply sought the advice of the council, not the law. And so there started being different civil wars rise in different places in the Roman Empire. People were getting fed up with that. There was a god over Rome, a goddess over Rome called Roma. She protected Rome. But it was evident that Roma could not do her job because of all these squabbles taking place throughout the empire. So the people started clamoring for a single ruler, not a king. They've already been through that. An emperor, the one who would call the shots. They figured that 2 guys could never get along, but one guy could benefit the empire. And this is how the republic transformed into an empire. And who was the first emperor of the Roman Empire? Augustus. Octavianus Augustus. And he brought the Roman Empire to its height. He was the best ruler that Rome ever had, any country ever had. And Augustus was just as powerful as Alexander. And he stopped all the piracy on the seas. I mean, he put the whammy on them. He stopped all the road hijackers so pilgrims could travel the roads without being waylaid. He brought peace to the world. All right? This was conducive to Christianity because God needed his gospel to be in a peaceful setting so that it could spread throughout that world. Number 4, though her wars were often iniquitous and unjustifiable, and she conquered like a barbarian, Rome ruled her conquests like a humane statesman. She treated every country respectfully, decently, and humanly. Number 2, equality. The intermixture of all races and mutual exchange of thought helped pave the way for the gospel. This showed how much people had in common with their neighbor. Though the various nations had different philosophies, there was one basic moral need blended together. All men were thus reduced to equality before one. Everybody recognized that they were mere human beings who mess up from time to time. The diaspora was a necessity. What is the diaspora? The diaspora was when in Acts 8, verse 1, there was persecution that rose in the church which was at Jerusalem. And the disciples were sent everywhere preaching the word. So they go to Babylonia, they go to Egypt, they go to Assyria, they go all over the world. They are dispersed because of persecution. That's the advantage of persecution. When everything is well, nobody's going to leave the nest. So God brings persecution into the picture and scatters everybody. Like the mama bird getting all the babies out of the nest. They go everywhere. This was important because these people would go everywhere with the gospel of the one God. Number 6, those Jews bringing from the homeland the spiritual monotheism of their race combined it with Greek philosophy, which had been setting steadily for monotheism. The Greeks had a strong system, philosophical system. Greeks loved philosophy. They loved anything that was new. Instead of casting these people who introduced something new out of their country, they gathered around them to hear more and more and more. They loved that which was new. Well, how conducive is that to Christianity? They're talking about a little boy who was born of a virgin, and he went through his life, and he ultimately died. This is brand new to these people, and it caught their attention. They didn't say, "You're crazy, get out of our country." They said, "We want to hear more of this. We want to hear more of it." All right. Where did I leave off? Let's get to number 7. The Roman spirit was at first essentially narrow and exclusive. In other words, Romans and Romans only. As their conquest increased, their mind was correspondingly widened. They adopted the philosophy of Alexander, sparing the gods of the conquered and admitting them into the responsibility of guarding Rome. They assimilated them with their own gods. I'm marking my place. And so, whenever Rome conquered other countries, they brought those gods from these other countries to Rome. What does that mean? Yes, religious freedom. Everybody could worship their own God. And that's the way it is in the United States. I abhor Islam. It's a wicked, wicked religion. Islam is a damnable, destroying religio government. It's not just a religion, it's a philosophy and it's a government that will destroy any and every country. But in order to have religious freedom, we have to allow the Islamists to worship as they see fit in our country. If they were not allowed, then other religions were going to be expunged, and Christianity may be one of those. Number 9, in this way, naturally, the religious ideas of conquered races, more highly civilized than the conquerors, laid hold on the Romans' mind. And so bringing all these different religions into Rome started making the Romans think about their own system of religion. Number 10, under the Roman Empire, all national barriers were removed. All nations were blended into one. Greeks and Orientals and Roman soldiers from various nations and slaves, and all were one. And there was one system of justice, but I don't want to jump the gun yet. Number 3, protection. Free movement about the Mediterranean world would have almost been impossible for the early foundation building of the gospel before the reign of Augustus. The division of the ancient world into small, jealous units, city-states or tribes, hindered travel and the spread of ideas. Pompey was a Roman general, and in BC 63 he conquered Jerusalem. Now, at that time, Jerusalem became subject to Rome. But instead of inculcating them in the Roman system, Augustus, who was ruling at the time of Pompey, told the Jews that they could maintain their own independence, their own government, their own people, their own hierarchy, their own high priesthood. They can be their own little independent state amongst the humongous Roman Empire on the proviso that you recognize Augustus as the one emperor who is over you. Number 2, that they offer a sacrifice, 2 sacrifices a day in honor of the emperor. A lamb at one sacrifice and an oxen at the other. Now the Jews already offer 2 sacrifices a day. A lamb in the morning sacrifice and a lamb in the evening sacrifice. All during the Roman Empire, the Jews offered 4 sacrifices a day, double on Saturday. Now that doesn't mean 8. Their own sacrifices had to be doubled. So there were 2 lambs in the morning and 2 lambs in the evening, a lamb and an oxen for the Roman. That's 6 sacrifices every Sabbath. I don't know if you've studied the Great War, the war between the Romans and the Jews, the 7-year war from 67 to 73. The straw that broke the camel's back, that really put the emperor over the hill as far as his anger toward the Jews, was that they stopped offering the Roman daily sacrifice. And he was not going to put up with that. So with a vengeance, they began this war to exterminate the Jewish people, ending in Masada in 73 AD. So a lot of people don't realize that the Jews offered 4 sacrifices every day of the year and 6 every Sabbath of the year. So Pompey had swept the pirates from the Mediterranean. The Roman soldiers kept the peace on the roads of Asia, Africa, and Europe. And remember, one reason God chose Palestine as the place to begin with his gospel was because it connected 3 continents. It was Africa in the southwest. There was Europe on the northeast. There was Asia on the northwest. Like Dale said, the roads led to every one of these continents. So the gospel could easily be taken to all 3 of these continents without any trouble. Number 1, under protection. The Roman power protected Greek civilization. No one would imagine what a scourge Rome would have proved to the world had she not fallen under the influence of the superior culture and philosophy of Greece. The government of Rome by itself was not the answer, but the government of Rome mixed with the culture of Greece was the answer God was looking for. It made a perfect society in which to bring his son. Remember Galatians 4:4, in the fullness of time, God sent forth the Son, born of a woman, born under the law. In the fullness of time means at the right time. So now God has everything perfectly set, a perfect setting for the gospel of Christ. There's Greek culture and Roman government. Number 3, the Romans, after causing much devastation, were gradually educated and civilized and have contributed to the uplifting and enlightenment of subsequent civilizations by both preserving and opening to the world the spiritual qualities of Greece. Everybody who's ever lived has been mesmerized by Greek philosophy and Greek culture. Everyone, Greek language. Now, we get into the language part here. The universal gospel, which was about to make its entrance into the world, would be in need of a universal language if it was to make maximum impact on the world. So let me veer from this just a bit. When Alexander the Great started, and I've told you this in my teaching on the life of Christ, but a way of review. Alexander's father, Philip III of Macedon, was the king. Macedon was a huge country at this time. Alexander the Great was the military general. He was 16 years old when he became general of the Grecian military. I don't think I would have trusted my 16-year-old son with gathering chicken eggs. Here's a guy who was a general. But Philip died. Remember how he died? He took over a little island called Maddox, which became later known as, poster coast, let me put it that way. He later named it Philippi, or Lydia. All these other great stories took place. It's called originally Maddox. He built a temple there. And he was going to have his daughter's wedding in the temple. So he had the 12 Greek gods marched in on the main door. His statue was the statue to himself. The soldiers didn't put up with that. That was blasphemy. That was blasphemy against the Grecian gods, and they killed him for it. So now, at 20 years of age, Alexander of Macedon, that's his real name, became the leader or the king of the Macedonians, the Grecian Empire. At 20, he's king. He begins his march westward. He comes down and conquers Palestine. He gets up further north and continues through Assyria. And he finally goes to Sutlej, India. And his men finally throw their hands up and say, "We're through. You are born a warrior. We are not. We have families. We're going back home to our families." So they turned around and went back to Babylon, made their stop at Babylon. Well, Alexander had no recourse but to follow them there. He died in Babylon of alcoholism. Excuse me. and then his other guys eventually go back home, and that's the demise. But while Alexander was conquering every country, what did he impose upon the citizenry? The Greek language. You see God changing a Hebrew culture into a Greek-speaking culture? He brought in a man who was more powerful than any general who ever lived. And he said, you now will learn my language. Well, who questioned that? Nobody questioned. Yes, sir. If that's what you want, that's what we'll do. He taught the classical Greek, which is the Greek they still speak in Greece today. Classical Greek is a living language. Living languages undergo changes in definitions. Koine Greek, in which the Bible was written, is a dead language, not spoken anywhere on the earth. Therefore, the definitions are sealed once and forever. I've talked to people about baptism. Well, that's what it meant in their day. No, don't tell me that. Baptizo is a dead word. The definition in the first century is the definition now and 1,000 years from now. That's the difference. Many of us can think of words right now that have changed in the English dictionary many times in the last 20 years. There are words that we used to use that we don't use today. At least Christians don't use them today. So now we have the whole world speaking classical Greek. Well, God didn't want classical Greek. He needed the biblical Koine Greek. Now remember, classical Greek was called Koine, and biblical Greek is called Koine. Why? The word Koine simply means common. Classical Greek was commonly spoken, as it is today. And Koine Greek was commonly spoken. That's why I say the biblical Koine. So here we have the Hebrews speaking Hebrew in their homes and in their universities. But out on the street, they spoke biblical Koine Greek. How did they get from classical Greek to biblical Koine? All right. It takes us back to the time that Israel was captured by the Assyrians. Tiglath-Pileser first comes down from Assyria, and then Shalmaneser comes down, then Sargon comes down. They made 3 invasions against the northern kingdom of Israel, and each time they carried a group of people back to the Assyrian captivity, which, by the way, was in Babylon. Both captivities, the captives were in Babylon. That was the common enslavement or concentration camp of the world at that time. It didn't matter who was ruling the world. Babylon was where the captives went. In Babylon, they were there for how many years? The Assyrian captivity, how many years? Okay. All right. Yeah, the 430 goes back to Egypt. And by the time they went into Egypt and the law was given, that's 430, 70 years. Okay. 70 years. Well, in 70 years, they couldn't speak Hebrew. Why? Because that wasn't the language of the Babylonians. What was the language of the Babylonians? Aramean. It's a Semitic language. Arabic, Aramean, Hebrew. All right. So they learned Aramean. Now when they're freed, and who freed them? Remember what general? Cyrus the Great of Persia. And this was his only reason for coming into the scene. God needed someone powerful enough to free the captives in the Assyrian captivity, and he frees them to come back home. And there are people who are speaking in the synagogues. Remember, what language did the scriptures have to be read in? The mother tongue. What's that? Hebrew. So here we have Aramean speaking members sitting out there, and the reader is reading in Hebrew. They don't understand what he's reading. So who's standing next to him? an interpreter called a metergoman. He is interpreting the Hebrew in Aramean so the audience can understand. And through the decades, the Aramean and the classical mixed together, producing the biblical Koine. But biblical Koine could not come out of Hebrew and classical Greek. It could only come out of Aramean and classical Greek. So God in His wisdom knows exactly every move He is making. And now we have a universal language spoken decades, long before the gospel ever came, and He wrote it in the language that the people were speaking. So today there is no excuse for anybody in the world not having the gospel. Remember what I've said about the Koine, biblical Koine. It is the only language that can be translated into every tongue and vernacular and language. That can't be said of English, German, Russian, or any other language. Only the biblical Koine. Now tell me that's a fluke. That's not a fluke. That is evidence of the wisdom of God, putting His gospel in every possible language and tongue. Any questions? No questions. Let's skip over to page 3. Now, with regard to the government of Rome, all your governmental dictates were printed in Latin. That was the language of the Roman Empire. There have been 7 universal languages from the beginning of time, starting with the Sumero-Akkadian and coming all the way down to the English. So the Roman government put out their dictates in the Latin language. But even on the streets of Rome, they spoke Koine Greek. On the streets of Palestine, Koine Greek. On the streets of Egypt, Koine Greek. Babylon, Assyria, Koine Greek. Everywhere. Now, roads, number 5, Roman numeral 5. Rome had an excellent system of roads to all parts of the empire. The main roads were built of concrete to serve for ages. Concrete. Can you believe that? We think we invented concrete. No, we did not invent concrete. They had tiles. I've got videos of this, DVDs. Tiles that are 4 and 5 feet wide, kind of circular, broken edges and things like that, that they would lay down, and they'd lay another tile, and between the tile would be cement. I have pictures of Roman roads in existence today. You remember this little road out here a few months ago being repaired? Do you think that's going to be here 100 years from now? How about 2,000 years? Since Rome built these roads, we've got them today. And they are still traveling on them. Amazing. That's the kind of engineering and ingenuity that the Romans had. Number 1, they excelled in the building of great highways. Number 2, these roads greatly facilitated the spread of the gospel. Get on one of these roads and boom, you're going. You won't be accosted by thieves or robbers or anything. Number 3, these roads were well protected by the Romans, thus becoming alive once more with a galaxy of caravans and traders. Commerce revived. Many of these traders and artisans were Christians, and while they bought and sold the goods they had, they seized every opportunity for the spread of the gospel. Rome paved 57,000 miles of roads with large tiles, as I said, going up to 4 and 5 feet in size, cementing them together. Some of these roads are still in good condition to this day. 57,000 miles. Now, the roads were so good that one could travel 165 miles a day on a Roman road. Today, it's nothing for us. But remember, they didn't have automobiles or anything with engines to run on these roads. Every 5 to 6 miles, they would have a relay station, and they'd have 40 horses all through the empire. Every 5 to 6 miles, 40 horses. So the carriage could pull up, and they could change out these horses in a matter of minutes, and they'd be on their way again. Pull up to another relay station, change horses, and they wouldn't be delayed hardly at all. Number 6, jurisprudence. The Romans and the subjects of the empire were treated with impartial justice. Excuse me. Impartial justice by the Roman courts. Everybody was treated fairly, the slave and the senator. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't some bribes like today. I had a friend, I preached a funeral one time of a man who came, of a woman, and a member of her family came up to me. He said he was a Dallas lawyer, very faithful Christian. And he told me he had to get out of the lawyer business because he said bribes all the time, bribes going under the table from lawyer to lawyer, from lawyer to jurist, from lawyer to judge. He said it's everywhere. And he said, as a Christian, I cannot any longer stay in this business. And he got out. And it's always been that way. But as far as the actual court trial, everybody was treated equally. Number 1, the first formal Roman code was on Greek patterns. Yet the Romans here, as in so many other respects, improved what they had borrowed and became masters of jurisprudence in the antique world. So they kept improving and improving and improving their judicial system. As their empire and conception expanded, they remodeled their laws to embrace all their subjects. Let's skip on down to next week. No, Eric will be here, I'm sure. I don't know because Lisa's not expected to live very much longer. Thank you for your time.